after Easter, and then in the summer as well. Probably just after a great Magic weekend, we hope. So, you still want to get these people together to build that team bond, to work out who in the group is going to fulfill what roles in the group going forward. And I think we have to look, yes, at the group now, and yes, hopefully helps the Great Britain tour, but also build towards 2021. And I know that there's people in here who probably won't be around the squad when it comes to 2021. I'm talking about O'Loughlin, Hill, maybe, the back end of their careers. But at the same time, I think it's the right thing to keep the continuity. Is there any surprise inclusions then, if you think maybe Westerman, who I think probably hasn't played in, I think Westerman's in the same bracket as Manfredi for me, that they haven't quite played enough games to get to get themselves into this squad. Is there anyone you think you would is a bit of a raised eyebrow being in the squad?
If I was to look on it purely on form, and I know that's not the reason for this squad, but if I was to look at it purely on form, I don't think Watkins doesn't look to have his confidence back yet. He seems a bit of a shadow of the player that he was before he got injured. But again, that seems a bit harsh to kind of exclude him on the basis that he's probably building back up from quite a serious kind of long-term injury. But in terms of form, he's probably the one player that I'd think is probably on the edge. Yeah,
I think Mulhern as well, to a slight extent. And Mulhern, I say as well, on the basis that he didn't get into the squad really at the back end of last year, despite being around the group. So I think that's a little bit of a surprise when there's people like Cooper, who are playing incredibly well at the moment, who may be arguably possibly more deserving on this season's efforts so far. I think they're looking for an element of continuity with a little bit of refresh as well. I think Adam Milner's not necessarily started this year as well as he finished last year, and then you can certainly throw the Wigan boys in there on that regard, most definitely, with the form that they've not shown, should we say. So there are a few, but Liam Watts is the main headline inclusion outside of the Charnley and Hughes that every press release talks about. Liam Watts being in, but Liam Watts has been outstanding so far for Castleford this season, so I think that's completely deserved. And that's another player who, if he wanted to go that way, Bennett could have him at 13 as well, because he's got very good ball skills as well as being a hard player, and he seems to have picked up in terms of consistency of not getting sent off yet still managing to play a tough physical game. So
he seems to have curbed his worst elements. No arguments with that.
Okay, do you have anything else on the EPS?
No, should we move on?
Let's move on.
Okay, so Castleford Tigers halfback Ben Roberts has had his contract cancelled by mutual consent. The 33-year-old Samoan and New Zealand international has struggled with injury this season and fallen out of favour, playing just one of 6 Super League games so far. He joined the Tigers in 2015 and made a total of 78 appearances. And some people have got in touch with us about this one. Adam Conley, 87, says, sorry to see Benny go. Undoubtedly a talented player, and we saw glimpses of that in 2017 with that drop goal versus Saints, who I'll never forget. But constant injuries meant we never really saw him at his consistent best. Probably a good move for both parties, and it opens up some salary cap and a quota place to bring in a much-needed centre. Joe Smith says, after an impressive 2017 season, injuries have betrayed him and Jake Truman has taken the chance he has had. Unfortunate for Ben, but I'm sure he'll go home having given Cass fans good memories. And Tom Andrews, getting back in touch on the news, says, the forgotten man at Cass, interesting to see where he lands. London would be my guess, so they can move Cunningham back to hooker.
Yeah, that's interesting. No one's really talked about Ben Roberts playing elsewhere. A few people have even suggested he's retired, which I don't think is the case. But I suspect he might end up just playing lower grades back down under now at this stage, because he's been riddled with injuries, hasn't he, for most of his time at Cass. He's never really been able to be consistent, either through his form at times, and then when he did get consistent form, you thought he was going to kick on, and then last year injuries, this year injuries. I think Adam summed it up pretty well, didn't he, from the Cas fans' perspective?
Yeah, it's a tough one, but I think it's probably best for both there.
And they can bring in hotly rumoured Anthony Gelling. Is the place there where they're looking to fill the quota and the cap space there. Okay. Wigan will not attempt to hold their former star player Shaun Edwards to his oral agreement to rejoin as head coach. Wales Rugby Union defence coach Edwards, who's 52, was unveiled as Wigan coach from 2020 when Adrian Lamb was appointed for the 2019 season. That was back in August last year. Edwards is due to leave Wales after this autumn's World Cup, but he says he's not finalised his next move. Basically, Wigan aren't going to stand in his way to take whatever much more lucratively financial deal he's got either at Wasps or potentially with England Rugby Union. So that's kind of the facts of the matter, isn't it? Even though it's speculative to call them facts at this stage, it just feels like that's the case. From a Wigan fan perspective, I'm really looking forward to getting a line drawn under this. The next issue on this is Lamb's going to get asked every week, do you know if you're going to be staying? Do you know if you're going to be staying? Do you know if you're going to be staying? And that's going to distract him, take away from what he's trying to work on with what seems to not be an easy task at the moment. And
he's not making it look like one.
No, and the question I've got to ask is, was he ever coming? Or did he just see his arse that Wales Rugby Union didn't immediately offer him the head coach job after Gatland was going to leave? So he went and talked to someone who's known for a long time in Ian Lenigan and did this deal that he clearly never was that fussed about, because otherwise, if Wigan didn't put a contract in front of him on the day, he would have been, where's my contract, where's my contract, where's my contract, right up until he was, in the swing of things with the Six Nations, because he didn't have much to do.
Yeah.
Didn't have a ton of things to do between August and the start of February, really. A few internationals, but what's that really? It's a bit of fun for these guys, I think. It's frustrating. It's just another negative situation that the Wigan club finds itself in off the field. I mean, Craig Mullen, it's been announced today as well, was arrested on Sunday night for drink driving. So, Wigan managed to have a positive in a win, and all straight away it's a negative, and the Edwards story keeps pushing on. I mean, every bloody Rugby Union team seems to have expressed some sort of interest in Shaun Edwards, so he ain't coming back.
It's not surprising that they've expressed an interest, with a bit of success. I mean, it's an obvious thing to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. You can't enforce a verbal agreement. You cannot, even if you swore on your pinky and swore on your mother's life, you cannot enforce it. It is difficult to enforce actual physical signed contracts sometimes, quite frankly. So actually enforcing something that's just a verbal agreement is. They couldn't even try. They'd get laughed out of. It would have
proved challenging. Yeah, it would have proved challenging, probably costly. And to be honest, it's done as much damage to Edwards' reputation with the Wigan fans as anything else. In reality, no one's winning out of this situation as it stands. We need to get it bolted off as soon as possible. Edwards needs to come out, apologise for sending the Wigan up a bit of a garden path here, take the rap so that Ian Lenigan gets off the rap, because I think Edwards owes Ian Lenigan that to some extent, because Edwards is going where he's going to get paid more. It seems like that's got to be the case, isn't it?
Well, probably, but I'm not ready to let Lenigan off the hook.
Oh no, don't get me wrong. Yeah, but I'm saying Edwards should come out and assist Ian Lenigan.
Oh yeah, I mean, they're both culpable in many ways, but I think it's in a season where your kind of administration systems have been held to account, to have something else held to account, which is basically about organisation, it's not particularly good. And that's been quite polite about it.
On top of that, there's question marks about culture now as well. I mean, with Craig Mullen's driving events that obviously will play out in the legal system. So we'll see what more comes out of all of that, and hopefully Wigan sort their shit out and actually make some sensible strides towards a conclusion of things. Talking of conclusion of things, Alan, who's been retiring?
Yep, so former Leeds and Wakefield front rower Richard Moore has been forced to retire following a head injury whilst playing for current club Hunslet. The 37-year-old had made more than 350 appearances for 10 clubs across Super League, the Championship and League One since making his debut in 2002.
Yep. Featherstone have released Papua New Guinea international Ase Boas from his contract with immediate effect because of a sudden change in his family life. Was what the Love Rugby League article said. Boas will return to his native PNG after making 5 competitive appearances for Rovers. Just a sideline on that, his brother Watson Boas is still at Rovers.
Okay. So in League One now, Coventry have signed Toby Richardson and Jacob Thomas on 1-month loan deals from Dewsbury with the possibility of an extension. Richardson is a front rower who could comfortably be playing in the back row or at loose forward. Thomas is an Australian halfback who was actually a target for the Bears in the off-season before he decided to join the Rams.
That's a long-winded of saying Richardson is a forward. I should have just proofread that before we did it. Just written Richardson is a forward. And finally, we might have a bit of a conversation to have around this one, I think, Alan. Eric Perez has revealed that he wants to bring professional rugby league to Ottawa next season. This again taken from the superb resource Love Rugby League. The entrepreneur who helped set up the Toronto Wolfpack is still on the club's board but would stand down if the Ottawa plan comes to fruition. He's acquired the Hemel Stags' licence for League One and hopes this will help fast-track his new projects into League One. Perez says he's submitted the paperwork to the RFL, who earlier last week said they had 2 bids that will be presented to the clubs for feedback. The other one, of course, being New York, which we've already heard and spoke a lot about the New York bid. This seems like a slightly different flavour to the New York bid and to the Toronto bid, if Eric Perez can be believed.
Yes, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I think, as usual with these kind of things, you need to understand the infrastructure that's behind them and make sure that they are authentic and kind of properly thought out bids. Obviously, he has a past in terms of being able to bring the Wolfpack forward, so that there's an element of experience there. It's an interesting case, isn't it? Talking about 2 more North American teams and the kind of the practicalities of having the idea of having 2 North American teams in a league such as League One, in terms of the challenges that has in terms of the finances, would be interesting, to say the least.
Well, there's nothing to say that the clubs would all decide that they both get sat into League One, I suppose. What Perez has said about Ottawa, which is different to New York, who, hypothetically have big blue chip sponsors potentially coming on board, or blokes with money who want to put that into bringing the likes of Sean Johnson or whoever into the Northern Hemisphere game. What Eric Perez has said about Ottawa is it would primarily be a from the ground up project with maybe a smaller playing budget with more homegrown players, so that there's a pathway that unfortunately the Wolfpack aren't really providing. They provided some element of pathway back at League One level and a little bit in the first season of the Championship, but it's become apparent that to make that next step it has to be Super League caliber players, and
yes,
with the best will in the world, Ryan Burrows and Quinn Nguati aren't that. So this is a different style of project. Ottawa's in north east Ontario, but probably closer to Montreal than it is to Toronto. So it's an interesting one from that point of view. Like, is there an appetite there for this? Is there going to be the player talent that they can pool that they can develop there? It's I don't think it's as saturated a sports market as Toronto is, but then again, it's also not as populated a place.
No, it does have a bit of I mean, I don't know it particularly well, but it's more of a Canberra style place rather than a Sydney. It's the capital, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So it has a bit more